Right now, pre-training is actually limited by this idea that AI researchers call the data wall, where we've actually run out of data to train AI models on. So if you look at the whole public internet, it's 15 trillion words. And then if you look at Llama 3, that's trained on 15 trillion words. If we want to make better AI models, we got to find more data somewhere. AI is only as good as the data you train on. And for me, kind of training AI models, I always wanted access to better data sets. It gives you access to data sets that you couldn't otherwise get access to.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Max Crypto interview, where we try to find the impactful builder in the industry and try to pick their brain to see how they look at the market, what are they actually building, what problem are they solving. And today we're joined by Anna from Vana Protocol. So Vana Protocol is a very interesting project. They're tackling on a very important issue right now, which is data ownership. And I'll have Anna introduce about Vana later on. Welcome, Anna.
Yeah, great to be here.
So can you briefly introduce yourself? What's your background? Why are you in crypto?
I got into crypto actually through mining ETH a while ago. So first I got interested in centralized currencies. I really liked central banks. I actually worked at the Federal Reserve, the US Federal Reserve in high school. I had a picture of Janet Yellen, who was chair of the Fed, in my high school bedroom, and was just the biggest fan, where I was really into economics and currency was central to it all. And so then I got to MIT for undergrad, learned about decentralized currencies, started mining Ethereum, and was this is amazing. I'm running a decentralized central bank from my dorm room. What could be better? You basically have a way to create something where usually you have to trust a single entity, but instead you can have a really large group of people kind of do it all together. Yeah, that was back in 2015, early MIT Bitcoin Club, 5 people, a bunch of really ideological folks. And then I got into kind of more of the AI side of things through some research that I was doing at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab. At the time, it was called natural language processing. Now people refer to that field as more large language models, LLMs, and just came to see how important data was in AI, how ultimately kind of AI is only as good as the data you train on. And for me, kind of training AI models, I always wanted access to better data sets. And I saw a lot of kind of my smart AI friends go work at big tech companies because they wanted access to data and compute. And so kind of the question and the problem space that led me to start Vana was, how could you take some of the tools that have worked for Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of building something in a decentralized way, so a large group of people can all help towards the same goal, and make that work for data and AI rather than just finance.
So let's dive in deeper about Vana. Can you introduce Vana Protocol? How does it actually work as a very high level, and what problem it is actually solving?
Yeah, so from a developer perspective, the problem that it solves is that it gives you access to data sets that you couldn't otherwise get access to, right? And so usually the best data lives inside of the walled gardens, Google or Facebook or Apple or Spotify, and you're not able to really access large amounts of it. Maybe you can access your own, but that's not really enough to train an AI model with. That's on the developer side. And then on the user side, there's kind of this problem, which is more your data as it exists today, you don't really own it, right? People can just use it. It's out there. You don't have much control over it. And I think for most people, that doesn't matter that much today. But as AI gets better and better, if you can create almost a digital clone of yourself, right? An AI trained on you, then it really matters who owns it, right? So those are the kind of two problems that we think about, both from a developer perspective and from a user perspective. From a technical point of view, Vana is a layer 1 blockchain that's able to work with private data, right? Usually blockchains don't work well with private data because everything is public. Vana is designed to kind of serve as this programmable data layer, which allows for all sorts of AI applications that are built on top of that private data.
So how does it actually work? So let's say today I have some personal data I wanted to contribute. I want to control my own data. How does it actually work in Vana? Can you kind of walk me through the steps to do it?
Yeah, so in the same way that when you use an application on Ethereum, you don't literally look at the blockchain, right? You interact with an application that somebody has built on top of Ethereum. So you would basically land on a web page, which is an application built by one of the builders on Vana. So there are a whole bunch of different builders who've built different applications. The top 16 data DAOs kind of earn a share of rewards. There's one for Twitter, there's one for Reddit, there's one for your 23andMe data. So let's just say there's one for Amazon shopping data. Let's say you land land on maybe actually the Spotify one. Okay, so you land on the Spotify one. It's a web page. You sign in with your wallet. That's your identity. So any EVM compatible wallet works. So sign in with MetaMask, sign in with any Wallet Connect wallet. And so that's basically identifying you and saying, this is me. If you want to contribute your Spotify data, what you do, I mean, in this case, you like click connect Spotify, you log into your Spotify account, and you're basically granting access to the data DAO to be able to kind of add your data into the collective data set. And there are two steps to this. The first step is writing your data to Vana. So when that happens, what you're doing is you're encrypting a copy of your data with a key that you control and kind of connecting it to your wallet. So once your music data and music list and history is connected to your wallet, then you can go to a different application, log in with your wallet, and for example, like personalize a fashion website based on the music you like. So it now has access to your music data. So that's the point where kind of your data is connected to your wallet. But then the application that you're using in this case, which I was giving, is like the Spotify data DAO. And so what you're able to do is verify that your data is actually legit and yours. So it's checking things like, hey, how old is the Spotify account? Does it have a lot of music listening history? Like, is this real? And kind of it's called proof of contribution in Vana. Mm-hmm. What is technically running is Python code in a trusted execution environment that is specific to each data set. And that is essentially measuring, hey, is this data good? Is it legit? It's actually scoring it as well. I'm actually not sure how the Spotify one does it specifically. I assume it's based on like account age. Maybe if you are a premium user, you get more, or if you have more songs you've listened to, you get more. And so you go through that verification process, and then you're able to actually claim data tokens based on the value of your data. And those data tokens represent your share of ownership in the data set. The data set token is essentially what governs access to the data DAO. So you can then vote, hey, we're willing to have an AI researcher access our data as long as we own the AI model. And then they're able to train an AI model in a privacy preserving way on the data. That was a pretty technical breakdown on both kind of adding data to the network, contributing it to a data DAO, and then also kind of the small note data access. We can get into all of those pieces probably in more detail. That's kind of the high level.
I think that's very clear. So Vana Protocol has all these data DAOs basically representing the user data, that it's like a cluster of the data. And basically by contributing my data, let's say to the Spotify data DAO, I would have a piece of the pie. So whenever the Spotify data DAO decided to, hey, let's sell this data or let's rent this data to a large language model A, and they will pay us, I don't know, like 20K USDC, then I share that piece of pie. Is that fair assumption?
Yeah, and there are some small mechanics there where so the USDC is swapped into Vana and the dataset specific token and then burned in a specific ratio depending on a fee switch. But the high level kind of flow is exactly right.
And then who writes the Python code of rating data quality? Who does that?
That's done by the person who creates the data DAO. So every data DAO has kind of their own founder behind it, right? There's a guy who's building the LinkedIn data DAO who actually used to work at LinkedIn selling data. So he really understands that data set. The 23andMe data DAO is started by its own team. We have an accelerator program to help support all the different data DAOs on the network. And often they know more about their specific data set than we do. Like they really kind of deeply understand. There's one that's focused on car data. There's another one, there's a biohacker DAO focused on sleep data. They let you connect your Aura ring, which is kind of like a smart sleep ring. And they know exactly what people are looking for who have that ring and want to contribute their data.
So in theory, there would not be like two different Spotify data DAO. It will just be one data DAO just for Spotify. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think that what we've seen so far is just more through like social consensus. We've been able to encourage people to pursue different data DAOs. I think that it is possible that we start to see some competing data DAOs. Like there are two genetic data DAOs, but they have a different focus. So one of them focuses on 23andMe data for the purposes of they actually want to buy 23andMe, the company, outright. Is kind of their long-term goal, with very ambitious. And then there's another one that focuses more on cancer research with the data. You can kind of create a data DAO for any data set that you want. And that's actually a really important point because a lot of people think that the company where you store your data is the one that owns your data. But in the same way, that's actually not true. In the same way that when you park your car in a parking lot, the parking lot doesn't own your car. Still your car, you can go and get it back. When you're using a platform like Twitter, X, or Venmo, or really any application, you can always take your data back and they'll always give you that data. So you can, as a builder, choose any data set that you think is valuable. And there will always be a way, because of data regulation, for users to be able to go and get their data.
Got it. And then you mentioned about the data I provided to the data DAO is encrypted. So in some terms, the owner of the data DAO, even the owner cannot see my data. Is that fair?
Exactly. So it's essentially, there's a trusted execution environment where your data is decrypted with a key that's controlled by the data DAO, only if the data DAO votes to say, yes, we want to have our data used for this particular use case, and the code is approved to be able to run on the data.
I want to dive into the incentives of Vana Protocol. So apparently when I contribute to my data to a data DAO, I get some tokens back of a data DAO token. What's the role of the Vana token? How does everything works?
So Vana is the native token of the L1. So it's used for transaction fees. It's used as a DEX pair. So like every data token is paired against Vana. And then it's used for some of the TE operations where basically like data access and stuff like that. You can think of data tokens as kind of like an ERC20 token, right? So in the same way that Ethereum doesn't own all the ERC20 tokens, Vana doesn't own all the data tokens. We've created a standard so people can create these different data tokens. And you can think of them as a little bit more like specific projects and like a data set that's tied to governing the data set overall, whereas Vana is the aggregate of all of these different data DAOs together.
I guess, how does Vana Protocol in general decide which data DAO is more valuable, that they wanted to incentivize more? Who decides that, and how does the mechanism work?
The top 16 data DAOs earn a share of reward. And what the rewards allow for is basically bootstrapping network effects to allow data to come into the ecosystem. And the core economic bet is basically this emission, this reward that goes out to help bring data onto the network, kind of reward that goes to both builders and users. In the long run, the fees captured from the value of that data living on Vana are greater than the reward that goes out, right? That's kind of from the purest economic perspective, the way to look at it. And the top 16 are based on how much Vana you have staked with you as a data DAO. If you get into the really kind of technical details, data DAOs in a developer context are actually called data liquidity pools. And what that's referring to is essentially kind of like how in an like liquidity pool for a DEX, it's basically like you're pooling data so that you have that data liquidity available to kind of train AI models on. So yeah, it's based on the top 16 by stake. And then there's a set of performance metrics, which is basically measuring like how valuable is the data. And those performance metrics are updated over time, right? So in the long run, the performance metrics are very focused on data access, right? And how much are people actually using this data? But early on, some of the rewards or the metrics are more focused on, okay, how many unique users are contributing data, how and sort of stuff that's a little bit more forward looking.
Let's say I am Anthropic, or like I'm a OpenAI. I wanted to get data from Vana Protocol. How do I reach out to the data DAO owner? Does it have a contact information? Can you walk me through that process?
Most Web2 companies don't like walk around looking for data DAOs to buy data from, right? They probably don't even know they exist.
Right.
And generally like the data sales industry is actually really small, right? It's a small, there are like a few companies. My co-founder used to work in data sales, like selling data to big tech. There are like 3 big companies that basically do all this. And so what you do as a Web2 company is you actually go to an ecosystem company called TensorSource, which is essentially acting as a bridge between the Web2 companies who don't know what a data DAO is and the data DAOs. And you tell them, this is the data I want, this is how much I want to pay. And then they handle kind of going and talking to the data DAOs and sorting everything out to get you your data. But if you are a kind of crypto native or more technical user who wants access to the data, then what you can do is put up a proposal to the different data DAOs on exactly what you want. And this is the case with one of the data DAOs, the Reddit one. They actually trained a model. There was a Google Brain ML engineer who said, hey, this sounds like a pretty cool data set. I want to train on this. So he put up a proposal to first get access to 10% of the underlying data, being able to look at some of it to understand what sort of AI model he could train that was better. And after looking at the data, he decided that it would probably just be good at shit posting, because that is like what happens on Reddit. Then he was like, okay. And then he used the whole data set to train the AI model in a privacy preserving way and create a better AI model at shit posting, right? Which is obviously sort of just start. Another use case I'd call out is there's this AI company called Flower AI, which is actually training AI models across the different data DAOs. And they're using a federated training approach where they have each data DAO train a piece of the model and then can kind of combine data data from across all of the data DAOs. And the reason why that's important is that, like, say if you look at Twitter data or you look at 23andMe data, if you just have one single data source, the company could have a fair amount of that too. So then it's like, well, we just have a subset of what Twitter already has. If you're getting data where it's kind of cross-platform data, so like for you, it's both your LinkedIn data, your Reddit data, and your YouTube data, no company has that. You're the only one that can have that. And that's what's really uniquely enabled by Web3. So those cross-platform data sets are generally much more valuable. To give another example there, like there's a company that buys data for kind of consumer insights, basically forecasting fashion trends actually. They buy people's fashion data and their Spotify data. If they were just buying Spotify data, that's worth about 30 cents. But if you have Spotify data plus fashion data and some demographic information, then that's worth $25 a person. So having that cross-platform data really makes a big difference, because then what they're able to do is say, based on the music you listen to, these are the clothes that you're probably going to want. But if they don't have the cross-platform data, they can't do that.
And so for the data DAO, like where does the data stored at? Do you guys work with specific infrastructure team for storage, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Vana is storage agnostic, right? So we are kind of a permissions and incentives layer for data. When a user comes in, they can actually connect their own storage. So they can connect like their Google Drive or their Dropbox to store their own copy of their data. But if they're getting paid in a data token, then there could be a risk that if I'm hosting my data, I might get paid and then like take my data down. And so essentially what happens is DataDAO holds a copy of their data in escrow, encrypted with a key, of course. And so that data, there are a few different storage providers on the network. Like, so we support like IPFS, basically any storage, like Google Cloud.
That makes sense. I want to dive into the infrastructure a little bit more for Vana. So apparently it is technically it's a layer 1 blockchain, and just wondering, what does it need? Have you ever explored maybe building a layer 2 on Ethereum, or why does it need to be a layer 1, or what's the ecosystem like?
In terms of kind of like the layer 2 question, because we have Vana really designed to process like private personal data, which is really not what blockchains are by default designed to do. Right? We have a very unique set of constraints, and one of them is actually data regulation, right? L2s generally make the trade-off. We're okay with more centralization in exchange for scalability. One example of that is, okay, you can just run a single sequencer. Now things are a lot faster.
Exactly.
One of the issues with that for Vana is that we actually can't have that centralization. If we were running a single sequencer, that would be considered a data processor under GDPR, which is the EU data regulation. And then that node, which I guess is the whole chain in the sequencer context, would be required to give users the right to delete, which is not possible in a blockchain context. So that's one example of basically where the L2 trade-off of more centralization is like okay in exchange for scalability. That trade-off basically doesn't work for us because we're designed specifically for this private data use case. But general principle, right, is like we designed from the ground up for these like private data transactions, right? Like the block space is containing both financial transactions, which are like token transfers and stuff like that, right, but also like data verification transactions.
What consensus mechanism is Vana layer 1? Like proof of stake, or can I stake Vana token to participate in like the governance, or how does it work?
There are kind of two aspects of Vana. So one of them is proof of contribution, where at the data liquidity pool level, kind of the DataDAO DLP, you are getting data verified and kind of reaching, there are proofs being submitted of like, yes, this data is legit, it passes this proof. And then there's also kind of the process of creating blocks on the network, right, which is done by the L1 validators. So there are TEE validators who do the data verification, and L1 validators who are basically doing kind of like the block creation in the network. And so that operates as like a proof of stake network. So yeah, there's the proof of stake piece, there's the proof of contribution piece, and then staking is a little bit unusual because you're actually staking with data DAOs, with DLPs. And in the roadmap, there's kind of delegated proof of stake coming. So if you're not running an L1 validator, you can still stake with an L1 validator.
Yep.
But right now in the network, and I'd say the most important piece of the network and where the majority of the emissions come from are related to onboarding data to the network. We really prioritize DLP staking and allowing people to participate in governance that way, because that's like the core piece that makes Vana successful as the data layer for AI.
I gotta say, I really like the concept of Vana, especially I can see how data data is like, apparently data is very important, but high quality data is actually what makes a LLM model better. And just looking at Vana, I think it's really good for fine-tuning model, like probably not for pre-training because the data set is probably not enough. But then if I have a LLM that I wanted to be more specific into one domain, then I think it would be really good use for Vana to do that. So looking ahead, what are Vana's biggest goals over the next 2 years? What are the main challenges that you're expecting to happen, and what are your plans to address those?
First, a note on your, like 100% what you were saying before on kind of fine tuning. And that's what we're seeing today. One thing I will add on pre-training is that right now, pre-training is actually limited by this idea that AI researchers call the data wall, where we've actually run out of data to train AI models on. So if you look at the whole public internet, it's 15 trillion words. And then if you look at Llama 3, that's trained on 15 trillion words. If we want to make better AI models, like we got to find more data somewhere. And we don't yet have more than 15 trillion tokens across all the data DAOs, right? So we're not there yet. But actually, one of the use cases we orient towards is how do you get 100 million people who all contribute their data so you can train an even better AI model than any single company has. That involves full pre-training, which is a massive undertaking. I will say Flower AI is doing full pre-training in a small context so we can scale it up over time. But I agree with you that I think over the next, especially like 12 to 18 months, the majority of the use cases will be more in fine-tuning and kind of building more specialized models. In terms of challenges and like what I look forward to, well, one has been like this transition. So we launched mainnet in December, we're fully permissionless, and some of the data DAOs who started to kind of deploy and be at the top, we didn't even know who they were, right? And so we started to see like these awesome data DAOs in a permissionless way. And that's been like a transition for us as a team, right? Because before it was like, oh, we know all the builders on the network, and sort of now it's like, okay, like it is a permissionless protocol and we gotta, scale this up. So that's been really cool to see. We have the next accelerator cohort of data DAOs that's kicking off. And a lot of those are focused on some kind of health and DeSci use cases, but it's across the board. I think that starting to see more and more of the data DAOs really be successful from a commercial perspective. Some of them are venture backed. Some of them are in the process of kind of their initial data sales and kind of initial model training, but really seeing them hit impressive benchmarks of like, no, the best health AI model lives on Vana. It's not just that there's a little bit of health data, it's that actually even Web 2 people come to use this AI model because it's the only place you can train on health data. The other thing I would highlight that actually is kind of upcoming in the roadmap and not yet available as a developer product, unless you kind of like hack it together yourself. It's not easily available as a developer product, it's technically there, but is data portability, which basically allows you to use your data that you've connected across different applications. So if you've connected your like music data and your fashion data, then you can log into a website and just grant access to it. So you can have like an autonomous AI agent, personal shopper that deeply understands you. So I think that use case, especially for AI agents and making them better and smarter, is something that I'm really excited about over like a 6-month time horizon. And then I'm just thinking, like on a slightly longer time horizon, like right now, I think that crypto AI, it's still really early in the industry. And I think that there's not yet an example in crypto AI where Web 2 AI really says, hey, this is why decentralization makes sense, right? I think there's still a lot of skepticism. So I think that one thing I really look forward to and that we're kind of working on, I actually spend a fair amount of time doing, is like really earning that respect from Web 2 AI companies and bringing new folks into seeing how decentralization can be really powerful in just building better AI systems. Yeah, I mean, I want like half the Y Combinator batch to all be just data DAOs and people building on Vana. So there are kind of other things like that. We need like 100 million users. I think having more and more kind of contributors, different client implementations, but I mean, those are more, those are some details on the way.
I love it. It's a crazy war right now with even in the Web 2 AI world with the DeepSeek model, and now like the two countries are competing for AI. And I'm just very happy to see in the crypto AI side, we have Vana, we have all these infrastructure being built, BitTensor. On the decentralized AI side, we're building something that's getting very relevant to the actual world right now. And I like to see that. So I would like to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for hosting me and for the thoughtful questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Anna.